Welcome! Today's the day we're going to put the differential in the main case of the BN. We've already installed the bevel gears for the PTO, the countershaft gear, the sliding gear shaft, and the shifters. The only thing we're missing is the shifter handle and the cover, and I thought it would be good to where if I could get my hand into this portion of the case, maybe even just to roll the gear around, maybe not, and may help with the alignment on the driven gear for the transmission. I wanted to make sure that this gear meshes well, because this one slides over to here and it meshes with the spur gear on the differential, and that's how the John Deere has reverse. Most other transmissions have a reverse idler shaft, but John Deere just makes it. That's probably why they're so high geared in reverse. That's kind of a notorious John Deere trait. The chief inspector's been busy. He's got the shifter tower cleaned up and the shifter. He's got a few parts to go, as you can see, but he's over here hard at work cleaning at the parts washer.
I want every part to be so clean that you can surgically implant them into a human body and they'll still live.
Per the norm, we use our good friend, the SM 2004 John Deere B book. And it has about anything you want to know about how putting this B tractor together. Highly recommend it to a person to get one of these. This is a copy of one that I bought off of eBay for cheap. It gets the job done. The actual John Deere ones the picture's a lot clearer, but this one gets the job done. And well, I really didn't want to shell out the bingo cards for the actual John Deere one, because the first thing we do is get the differential out of the tractor and disassemble it. That requires the use of a press, and I didn't feel like we needed to show me pressing bearings off the differential. I'm sure you guys know how to do that. The first thing we take off is the snap ring. Second item is this differential bearing. The third item to take off is this selective thickness washer. It's a thrust washer. And then we have the side pinion gear. And then, if you have to, you can remove these rivets and take the pinion shavs out and the pinions themselves out. There's a spec on these pinions and the shafts I got it right here on my thing here. From the pinion shaft from 0.858 to 0.860, and the pinion gear is 863 to 0.860. I made an executive decision that these pinion gears are smooth. They don't have excessive clearance, side to side. I didn't feel like I needed to be reinstalling these rivets again. Chances of them falling out are probably slim if you bratted them back over. It's a lot of extra work for not very much benefit. So we decided not to do that. The first thing we measured was this dimension right here, which is the side pinion shaft. They need to measure that. I have the specs in my log here. It's also in, I got them from the SM 2004 John Deere book. And also, we need to measure this inside of this bore. I keep a log of what we're measuring, what the specification is, and what we have when we measured it to see. I like to do that, kind of keeps a log of what all we've done and it's very good if you was to ever want to sell the tractor. You could tell somebody, I did a restoration on this tractor. This is what we found. This part here was in spec, but it's on the outside. That way you're pretty transparent, and it's also good for sometimes you'll have to go back and go, this thing's making noise, wonder why, and you'll go back and go, oh, I had the spec as I got the spec incorrect, and when I measured it, it was obviously too much clearance there, and that's why it makes the noise, or who knows. But it's just good practice to keep a data book for these restoration projects. The next thing that we'll have to measure is the thickness of this thrust washer. You can also get that information from the manual. So we checked all this stuff, looked at the gear teeth, cleaned the bearings and made sure they were smooth, and everything checked out really good. We're over here at the 20-ton press, and our first item to go on is this differential side gear. It just goes on there like that. This is the shim. Put it in there, make sure it is it has a notch cut in it. So is the shaft, so it is orientated to where it can't spin around. Next item is the differential side bearing. Now I'm using a 1 3/4 inch socket to press this on. The 20-ton press will probably make short work of this. Now we're over here on the bench, we're ready to put our snap rings in. I told you incorrectly that the thrust washer that goes between this gear and this bearing was a selective size. That is incorrect. What is selective is the thickness of this snap ring. John Deere sells different thicknesses of snap rings for the stacked up clearance of the gear, thrust washer, and bearing. So if you got a snap ring that won't go back where it was, that's probably the reason why. So we're going to put in the differential. Since we painted the inside of this case, we don't want to scar up our beautiful paint job on the inside, so we don't want it to start to chip and fall off and be a bunch of stuff in the bottom of the case. So we'll put this big heavy towel down, and it protects the gear from any kind of extra abuse. I have found out, forgive me if I hit the camera by accident, but this thing's kind of heavy. So I'm gonna stick this guy in here like this, reaching through here. And you try it. And of course, get it into this side here first. Roll it around. Then you get it in there like that. That seems to be the best way I've found so far. Next we're going to put the quill in, is what this piece where the bearing runs into, they call it a quill. You want to, I didn't replace the bearings in this. I thought they were still good enough to run. They smooth, didn't have any scarring or anything. What you're supposed to do to start with is I put the thickness of shims and gaskets that the tractor basically, when we tore it apart, we measured what we had and we just replaced it with the same thickness as the gaskets. So this guy here goes in like this. Now, this one here was kind of ground on a little bit. I don't know if it's meant anything or not, but what I do is start it in there like that, and you'll have to lift up on the differential. Of course, it's going to resist, but you got to get the bearing up in there so you can start it into the transmission case. So let me get my pry bar here so I can get it underneath the gear. Paul, can you push that in? Okay, just about. All right, that's enough. Now, there's a bolt, just a regular bolt, cap screw with a lock washer. You twisted it just a little bit when you put it in there. That's all right. Get that one started. Then there's bolts that have for a lock wire, and they go right here. They're a little shorter, and there's no low washer at all on those. So basically you just start those, but try to get a shim pack that mimics what came out of it. If you don't know, just put in a standard shim. Only thing you got is you're just basically going to have to guess at first. Then once you get your preload, you can take gaskets out of this side and put them in this side, on the opposite side, and that will make it so this big gear will mesh correctly with the gear on the counter shaft of the transmission. This is the quill for the left side. This is the side that you will do all your bearing adjustments, as in you will change the thickness. I made a couple of different gaskets that are different thickness, and this shim, there's a metal shim that came out of this side too. So right now I got a shim and I got the thickest gasket that I made, and I'm going to start with that. So we'll work that way. Like I said, I made a couple of different gaskets, and this is kind of the same song and dance as the other side. You gotta lift the bearing up on the one end, and well, that didn't fight too much. Okay, so then you tighten up this side here. I forgot. This is where you're supposed to put the stud, and then this here is regular cap screws with lock washers. So we'll get these tightened up, and we'll get the ones on the other side, and we'll bring you back here in a minute to check the preload on the bearings, and we'll get that job done. All right, we're going to set the preload on the bearings. We're going to check it. So we've tightened up both sides. This side here has I think a 45 thousandths shim in it, and this one here has a 45 thousandths and a 10 thousandths shim on this side. That's just a starting point to see where we're at. maybe we'll get lucky and it'll work. Now I've got a pry bar here. It's got a little, I call them a lady's foot. I don't know what the rest of the world calls them. But you get in here and you pry on this tooth right here and against this case. You try not to turn the gear. And we pry on a little bit this way. And then I try to snake this in here again. Get it on the tooth, get it there. Try not to turn the wheel, and you pry that way. Now, this is going to be said, if you could get whatever rating you want with this, because this case and all this stuff will flex just a tiny bit. So if you got a bar, I don't know, this big, you can actually spring this cast iron case that much. So don't get crazy with it. Try to put the same amount of tension on it that you do, you know, just by feel. It's the only way you can do it. So I'm going to turn this light off. Hopefully you can read the gauge here. So we're going to put her in here. Hold the gear, make sure it don't turn. Looks like it's going in 3 to 4. Go on this side. Try not to roll the gear. So we got it at 0 there. And on this side, I mean, you can really put the pressure on it and get it there, but it'll spring back. So you get a little pressure on it and let it spring back. Try to do that a couple times. So we got 4 thousandths there. Then we're going to come back over here. Put some pressure on it, let it spring back. Oop. Pressure on it, spring back. And now it's on 0. So I think this, you know, I'm thinking that we got around 3 to 4 thousandths preload, you know, basically clearance on these bearings, which the spec is 1 to 4 thousandths. I know I should go get me a lottery ticket because we hit this first time. So unfortunately, I got to take them shim packs back apart and brush some sealer on those gaskets a little bit. We don't want to have a big leak, because you paint anything and that's when it'll spring a leak. So we don't want to have that happen. So that's how you set the rear end up on these. I'll show you how the gear aligns with the gear on the counter shaft next. Alright, I got my handy dandy little screwdriver pointer here. Right, what we're looking at is this is the ring gear that we just installed. Well, it's not really a ring gear, it's kind of, they call it a spur gear on the differential. But this is that. And then this up here, this is the sliding shaft for the transmission, and then below it, you can just barely see it, this is the counter shaft, okay? And if you look right here, you can just barely see the edge of a gear right here. That's the gear that drives the spur gear for the differential. I'm trying to show you exactly what I mean by, here is how you check to see the mesh of your differential gear. Now if you got an older B and some other older models, this isn't really adjustable because you don't have the right hand quill. They just have a bearing that pushes in there. But on this particular model, you can adjust this. But right here, where I'm pointing with my screwdriver, this is the ring gear, okay? This is what we just put in. And you can see here, up in that direction, That's the counter shaft on the bottom of the transmission. And that's where it meshes with the transmission gear. That's what drives it. So you want that gear to be in the exact same place as it was for the last 70 years. You don't want it to be sliding, you know, way over to the left or right in the case to where it's partially meshing with a new, you know, part of the gear it hasn't rode on before, and then partially meshing with a worn gear. You want it, even if it is worn, you want it to go right back where it was at, because that'll cause the gears to wear excessively. And you could also have problems with possibly it knocking a tooth off of a gear because of extra clearance. So but ideally it's supposed to have, it don't really necessarily have to be centered on that gear because it's a little wider than the ring gear on the differential, but it needs to have some of the gear riding on, you know, inboard of the countershaft gear. So basically, it can be a little bit over to the left or right, but as long as it's not running off of the gear, that's what you want. If it's running off the gear, I would suggest that you take shims out of the left side and put it in the right side. It's going to shim it over to your right side, and vice versa. If it's doing the other thing, take shims out of the right side, put it in the left side, because that's not going to change your preload on your bearings. It's just going to shift this ring gear over to the left or right to get the measurement that you desire. Well, the differential's installed. We went ahead and put sealer on both sides of the coils. Got them all squared away, tightened up and torqued. Still got to put some safety wire on that. I ran out. And the last thing is to put in the log how many thousandths the bearing preload was for our records. Looks like we're out of parts for right now, but looks like we got a nice little pile right there to work from. So we'll pull something out, clean it, go through it, and bring you back when we're ready. Thank you. Second verse, the same as the first.